So this video topic might seem pretty obvious to most of you guys because we have canon rankings for the Espada. They were ranked by Aizen himself, who is one of the smartest characters in the series. So to say that like Aizen was wrong with his rankings is a bit far-fetched, but I think there's some wiggle room to debate as to why the Espadas were ranked the way they were. See, in the data book, it says the Espadas were actually given a number by Aizen depending on their skill level, and that can mean a whole host of different things. Skill level doesn't innately mean how powerful one is. It could be that one fighter is more skilled than another. Maybe one fighter is more skilled at using their Ryatsu than another one, or they have better techniques or something like that. That's just an example of what skill level can mean. Now, in another entry, it does say the Espada are ranked according to their spiritual powers. The lower the number, the higher their spiritual power, which I think we would all agree that basically means the lower the number the Espada has, the more Ryatsu they're able to kind of swing around. Like they just have like a bigger Ryatsu pool, right? And that would make sense. As the Espada go up, we start to see things like Ukiyora. He goes into his Resurrection. He can't use it in Las Noches for fear that he'll destroy Las Noches, and he creates this Ryatsu rain whenever he goes into his first resurrection. His second resurrection creates this ocean of Ryatsu. And then you have Stark, who is so powerful that just existing near other hollows would cause them to die. And we don't see that from these other hollows. Now, there is an argument to be made that having more innate Ryatsu does not make you innately stronger than another character. It's a very similar argument to Kid Naruto versus Kakashi in part 1, where Kid Naruto has much more chakra than Kakashi, but because he doesn't know how to use it and wield it properly, he's not actually stronger than Kakashi. It's a similar argument, and I'm not gonna say that it's right or wrong, but we will be using that as the basis for this video, because if it's true that more Ryatsu makes you innately stronger than someone with less Ryatsu, then the Espadas would have been ranked correctly, and there's no point in doing an Espada ranking video. But if it's not true that having more Ryatsu makes you innately stronger than someone with less Ryatsu, then we can actually look at the Espada's rankings and being like, okay, well, let's rank them in terms of how strong they are, because maybe it was just, oh, these Espadas have more Ryatsu than the other is, and that's how I'm going to rank them. So it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to argue some things, and it also explains why Noitora and Yami can both claim to be the strongest, despite not showing the same level of Ryatsu as, say, Stark or Ukiyora. Yami proclaims to be the strongest, but his Resurrection is not in danger or threatening Las Noches. And the same thing for Noitora. He doesn't display nearly the same level of Ryatsu as Ukiyora or Stark. There's also some interesting things about how the Espada can actually be demoted. It doesn't always seem to be, oh, the Espada are demoted because they get weaker. So you look at someone like Grimmjow, and Grimmjow loses an arm, and it's incinerated by Kaname. He loses his rank, and then he plummets to just not even being an Espada anymore. Like, he has no number. And that's not because Grimmjow lost one of his arms and he's all of a sudden just like infinitely weaker. The thing with Grimmjow is he was removed from the Espada as a punishment. It wasn't a power thing, it was a punishment. And Grimmjow is someone that values power over everything. He wants to become the strongest so he can look down on everyone. But then Aizen strips away his rank and puts Loopy over Grimmjow. Loopy is someone that is far weaker than Grimmjow, as shown when Grimmjow just obliterates him very casually. So not only does Grimmjow not have his rank anymore, but someone weaker than him is now looking down upon him. It's probably the most brutal thing Aizen could have done to Grimmjow. There's also the pre-Verone Espada, where they were all removed from the Espada just because they were inferior products to the new generation of Arrancar. They were all Arrancar that had to manually remove their masks, kind of like we see Ice Ringer do to Grand Fisher, but then Aizen comes in with this new wave of Arrancars that he uses the Hogyoku to create, and then he just replaces all of the old Arrancar, well, save for one, despite the fact that Dordoni's pretty strong. Like, he was scrapping with Bankai Ichigo. Tsuruchi was doing decently well against Uryu, and Gantenbein was doing decently well against Chad as well. It didn't seem like they were all that weak, especially compared to someone like Yami, but that's a whole other debate for another time. And I just want you guys to kind of be aware of all that when we're going into. That's kind of the basis for this video, where we're using this excuse of like, well, Aizen's ranking for the Espada seems to be based on skill and maybe how much Ryatsu they have, not not necessarily how strong they were. So we're gonna rank them in terms of their power. You know, we're going to look at their different showings and we're gonna rank them in that order. I already feel like there's gonna be a lot of people disagreeing, because even I was surprised with my end product for this video. I was like, is this really what I'm about to say? Am I really about to put out this video? And I feel like there's going to be a lot of anger and a lot of comments and questions like thrown my way. So please do not hesitate to come join the Discord and talk to me about this video topic. Just know that if you're like more shy and more meek and you just want to have a little discussion, you don't necessarily want to get into a whole like debate or altercation, make sure you make that known at the very beginning. Otherwise, I'm gonna go in there thinking you want to debate and I will give you the foot. I will step on you. But the Discord is in the description for those of you that want to take that extra step and come interact and maybe talk about this video topic, because I guarantee there are going to be questions. People are not going to be able to accept some of the listings in this video. So, you know, by all means, feel free to come in the Discord and talk this out with me. I'll explain it to the best of my abilities. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into this video. There's a lot of Espada that are going to be more tiered together because some of them have feats or showings that kind of place them next to each other. So I'll probably go over the tier list more in like pairings or like groups, if that makes sense. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this topic. So first up on the tier list at the lowest rank, we have Untitled, and this should not be a surprise because Untitled only really has his fight with Rukia to go off of. And while Rukia, to her credit, is a lieutenant, or should be a lieutenant if not for Byakuya's intervention, that just doesn't hold up to a lot of the other Espada's showings, especially when Untilted's databook entry says the only reason he was allowed to stay from the past generation of Espada was because Aizen saw his evolutionary capabilities and kept him around because of his potential. So that doesn't even mean that he's necessarily strong right now. Aizen just believes that given enough time and effort, Untitled could actually develop into someone kind of powerful. But right next to Untitled, I have Scialopero. Now, the reason Untitled and Scialopero are pretty close to one another is because of the Hellverse movie, which is debatably canon, because we have the interview saying that Kubo helped work on the Hellverse movie, and while he said he wasn't happy with the finished product, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not canon. That just means Kubo made a movie and he's not happy with it. So if you want to accept that it's canon and you want to accept the like first 30 seconds of the film where Untitled seems confident he can take on Scialopero, then they're more relative than we think, which I suppose should hold up, seeing as Scialopero again only really fights Renji and Uryu, but when he fights them, he's fighting them in his lab where he's researched and knows how to cancel out all of their Ryatsu. Like, Renji can't even use Bankai, but despite all of that, even with Scialopero mitigating the damage of Renji's Kido, he's still almost brutally injured by it. And keep in mind that Kido is not Renji's forte, so Scialopero also doesn't have the best showings, seeing as this lieutenant is able to maim him with Kido without his Bankai. Then Mayuri comes in and you're like, well, I mean, he's going to be able to fight a captain. That's going to look really good for him because, you know, Mayuri did have to prep against Scialopero. He used his Bankai and Nemu died. Like, it was a pretty intense battle, right? But never once was Mayuri really in a bad position in that battle at all. Like, Mayuri was always in control and never was in any real threat of dying or being harmed in any way. He was even making jokes about it as the fight was going on. He was like, yeah, I replaced all my organs in like 5 minutes, and then did this whole big meme where he was like, oh no, you've crushed my limbs, oh, it's so bad. And then he's just like, oh, I'm just joking, I'm just playing around. Like, the whole thing was really portrayed as Mayuri looking down on Scialopero because he was like, man, you really don't even know what a scientist is. You don't even know what the concept of perfection is. And it's just not a very good showing for Scialopero. Now, you might be able to say that Untitled is confident he can take on Scialopero because they're not in his lab and he doesn't have all of his fraction available to him, because that is the kind of fighter Scialopero is. He uses everything to his advantage. You know, he can use his environment to his advantage. He literally just eats all of his fraction to restore his own health. So he's taking advantage of everything he has, and maybe that's why Untitled is like, okay, you don't got any of your goons, you don't have your Ryatsu canceling abilities right now, I can take you on and kill you, which even then still shows that Untitled thinks he can take on Ciel and shows that they're a bit more relative. So Untitled at the bottom with Scialopero over him. Next up we have Grimjaw, because his showings are already much better than the last two. He's able to fight Bankai Ichigo, who we already know is comparable to captains and at this point is debatably twice the strength of a captain, and then he can fight that Bankai Ichigo with the power of holification, which is confirmed to go beyond the power of Bankai, so it's like he stacked a stronger Bankai on top of his Bankai while already being as strong as a captain, and Grimmjow is able to have a pretty pitched fight with him, meaning that Grimmjow's showings are already much better than Scialopro and Aranyero's combined. The only problem is he's fighting an Ichigo that kind of power cliffs himself just a few chapters later in the arc, which we'll get to when we talk about Ukiyora, and that's kind of where Grimmjow suffers, because aside from Ichigo, he doesn't fight anybody else. I mean, he kind of scraps with base Ukiyora for a little bit, but the fact that Grimmjow threw Ukiyora in the Kaja Negacion, you know, the little prison that you can use to punish your subordinates, the fact that he would rather do that than actually fight Ukiyora kind of shows that Grimmjow wasn't super confident he'd win that fight, and we'll definitely talk about why he would not have won that fight in just a little bit. But then right above Grimmjow is Noitora, for the express reason that Noitora attacks Grimmjow while Grimmjow is fatigued and weakened from his battle with Ichigo, and we know that Noitora is not above killing his comrades. He literally does it all the time, and yet when he attacks Grimmjow, it just kind of knocks him over, and even Noitora's like, oh, how is this dude still alive? Like, he was surprised that Grimmjow just didn't die, so it's like, what, Noitora can't just kill a basically already on the verge of death Grimmjow? That's kind of weird. That's suspicious, you know? Like, that's a little odd. So Noitora and Grimmjow are more relative than we would think as well, since Noitora just can't kill this very weak and, you know, fatigued Grimmjow right here. And you can't even use the Kenpachi fight for Noitora, because it's like, oh dude, well Kenpachi fought Noitora, then he goes on to fight Yami, but the problem is that Kenpachi lowers his Royatsu to his opponent's level so he can have a good fight, and he continues to do that until he gets like basically his full potential unlocked by Unohana in the 1,000-Year Blood War. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but the Espada arc happens before the 1,000-Year Blood War, so using Kenpachi is not a very good measuring stick. I'm just gonna say that right now. So then all we really have for Noitora is like, well, he couldn't kill Grimmjow, but he did knock him over. He was fighting with Neliel, but we have no idea how strong Neliel is because she literally just scales with Noitora. And then Noitora has the hardest hero of all the Espada, which is great. That's nice that you have really good durability, but what does that mean for your attack potency? Not very much. You might say, well, Kenpachi can cut Noitora's hero, and then Noitora can fight and parry with Kenpachi, so he's capable of hurting the strongest Espada's hero, but that doesn't necessarily make him the strongest physically, right? Just because Noitora has the highest durability doesn't mean he has the highest attack potency of all of the Espada. And Hierro isn't even necessarily their durability as well, it's just their like thick iron skin coating. So it's kind of a weird argument to make to try to make Noitora really powerful, but it doesn't really hold up. And even the other Espada don't even seem to think it's like all that impressive. They're like, alright dude, you got the strongest Hierro, that's very fantastic. Like, they don't particularly care. Nobody really cares. Because at the end of the day, it's not really saving Noitora from getting cut up by Kenpachi or getting cut up by Neliel. So if you've got this super high, hard durability, why are you still getting bodied by everyone around you, you know? It just doesn't come off as being very impressive. You can almost look at it as like the Espada are 10 knights and Noitora's suit of armor is the strongest. He's got the thickest suit of armor on him, and that's great and all. But if you don't know how to swing your sword, or you're not very strong yourself, like you can't actually hurt anybody, then why does it matter that you got the strongest arm? But I'll let you guys debate that in the comments, because I know that there's a lot of people that are like, no dude, Noitora, big strong, he's strongest Espada. So I'll let you guys argue that out in the comments. Next we have Ukiyora. Now Ukiyora is the major benchmark for this tier list. After Ukiyora, things are going to get a little bit dicey depending on how we interpret some of these statements. Now, the reason Ukiyora is above the previous two is because, well, Grimmjow can fight with Masked Ichigo and they're pretty even. In fact, Masked Ichigo just straight up beats Grimmjow. And Ukiyora in his first resurrection is dukeying all over that Masked Ichigo. And then he has another resurrection on top of that. So he kind of power cliffs all of the Espada that are under him current. Because it's like, not only can I body the guy that is beating you right now, or that you're at least relative to, but I have another resurrection on top of that, just in case. So Ukiyora pretty heavily power cliffs all the Espada below him. But then we have a few Espada remaining. We have Yami, Zomari, Hallibel, Stark, and Baragon. And so it's like, why is Ukiyora not stronger than them? And this is going to spoil a little bit of the list, but Ukiyora does say that there are 3 Espada above him that are stronger than him, and these are presumed to be Stark, Hallibel, and Baragon, the first, second, and third Espada. So Ukiyora himself is admitting that these Espada are stronger than he is. And given that he's telling this to Ichigo when he's dying, this is not like him lying. Like, there's no reason for him to lie about this. Ukiyora is a very, like, logical type of person who, like, very straightforward thinker. It's not in character for him to start, like, lying about all of this. If anything, Ukiyora is a very, like, truthful person. It's almost like the whole point of his fight with Ichigo is that he's really just trying to be like, yo, you're outmatched. Okay, no, let me show you my other resurrection. No, you're really outmatched. Here's Segunda Etapa. Like, trying to make him understand, no, you really are outmatched. I'm not lying to you. So to say that Ukiyora was lying or trying to be deceptive to Ichigo would just be a very weird stance to have. Now, where we get into a little bit of an argument is Yami, because Yami claims that Ukiyora, Grimmjow, and Noitora, the Espadas that Ichigo fought, are all trash compared to him. And Ichigo inadvertently agrees with Yami. He says, I don't care if you're stronger than them, I'll still beat you like the rest, which is an indirect confirmation that Yami is indeed stronger than Ukiyora in his resurrection, and this is coming from Ichigo, who has fought all of these Espada. And even though Ichigo mostly fought Ukiyora when he was in his full hollow state, he still did encounter him and get a pretty decisive beatdown from him while he was still, you know, not going full berserker mode. So he should have a good idea of both of their abilities, and yet he agrees with Yami. Although you could argue that Ichigo's not agreeing with Yami. He's saying it doesn't matter if you were stronger than them because I'll still beat you, right? And then you could pair that with Ukiyora never admitting that Yami is stronger than him. He only says 3. He only says, you know, Stark, Baragon, and Hallibel are stronger than him. So that's why Ukiyora is in a very odd place. Because if you believe Yami's statements that he is the strongest, and you believe that Ichigo is confirming that Yami is the strongest, and you know, maybe you use some of the databook entries in Unmasked, the 3rd databook, to support that, then perhaps you could have Yami be above Ukiyora. But if you don't, then the placing on this list would change a little bit. So I just wanted to address that because I know everybody really loves Ukiyora, and I need to address that it's like his placing could shift depending on how you argue things. From this point, it should be pretty easy to wrap up the tier list because at this point, it kind of does depend on how you want to argue things, and it would shuffle around the positions just a little bit depending on that. But right above Ukiyora, we would have Stark, Baragon, and Hallibel. The reason they're all right next to each other is because when they arrive in Fake Karakura Town, Shunsui and Jushiro are like, who is the strongest between these 3? And neither of them can tell. So that does mean that the 3 of them are so close in power that nobody's able to tell who's the strongest between the 3 of them. So they all go in a group, and if Ukiyora admits that they're stronger than he is, then they would go right above Ukiyora. Then following them, you would have Yami, as Yami says, well, Ukiyora and all these other Espada are trash, I'm the strongest Espada, me, Yami, let's go. So if that's the case, Yami's the strongest Espada, he's all the way at the tippy top, we're done with the list, right? Well, no, we still have Zomari, and he's kind of been the black goose here, the ugly duckling, if you will, because nobody likes Zomari, but he actually has some pretty decent showings. After going and reading some of his databook entries, I was like, dang, they really did give Zomari some of the suck, you know what I mean? Because not only is Zomari strong enough with his Amor ability to completely suppress Byakuya, like Byakuya can't overpower his Amor ability, meaning Zomari is more relative to Byakuya if Byakuya cannot, you know, overpower his ability. And Byakuya would later go on to fight Yami, but it gets a little bit better than that, because Zomari, with his little cocoon ball thing that he does, it says that he's able to completely neg the Gokei ability that Byakuya uses against Zomari, which I don't know if you guys remember from the Soul Society arc, but we do know from Zangetsu that named techniques are stronger than just random techniques that you could use. And with a random swipe of his hand, Byakuya was able to dent Yami's face in with his Byakuya's Bankai, yet with a named technique, he wasn't able to pierce Zomari's armor. So this could mean quite a few things here, and this could be argued in a multitude of different ways. We could say that Byakuya is not able to overpower Zomari's ability, so Zomari is actually more relative to Byakuya, and Byakuya is relative to Yami, so Zomari is closer to Yami's tier than he is anybody else. If you're gonna be the type of person that argues that Noitor's durability makes him like uber super strong, then Zomari should also be really high because he was able to completely neg Byakuya's Bankai ability. However, Yami and Zomari could go lower if we don't think his statements are valid. See, he only says Grimmjow, Noitor, and Ukiyora, so he could just be right above Ukiyora and the other Espada could be stronger than Yami. You can kind of see where we're getting some contention, because at that point, when it comes to the top 3 Espada versus Yami, they don't really have any statements correlating to one another. Like Yami has his I'm the strongest Espada thing, but at that point we have to kind of compare the Shinigami that they fought, and so it really at that point becomes Byakuya and Kenpachi versus Shunsui and Jushiro. It doesn't matter that Baragon fought Soifone, it doesn't matter that Hallibel fought Toshiro, because they're all relative at the end of the day. It's weird to think about, but because they're so relative, in theory, if Soifone hit Stark with her Bankai, it would have done the same damage it did to Baragon, and the same for Hallibel, right? And vice versa. All those different combinations work because they're so relative. So at that point, we just have all of these Espadas shifting around depending on which statements you argue for. I will say, I don't think there's any statement combination you can use to get Ukiyora to be above the top 3, because he says that Aizen didn't know about a Segunda Etapa, but it's pretty well-known common knowledge that Ukiyora was actually wrong, because when Aizen's going over all of the battles he planned for Ichigo, he shows Segunda Etapa Ukiyora. If they wanted to imply that Aizen didn't know about it, they would have just shown regular Ukiyora, Resurrection 1 Ukiyora, to be like, yeah, see, Aizen wanted him to fight Ukiyora as like part of his stepping stone, like part of his evolution, but they blatantly go out of their way to show us Segunda Etapa Ukiyora. So I don't really think there's any way to really get Ukiyora above them, unless you do some weird like feats only argument, because if you go with like, oh, well, what about just their feats, like just their calcs and everything, then obviously Ukiyora has some of the best feats of all the Espada, if not the best feats, period. So that is the Espada tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed. That is how I think the rankings could go down. I mean, I know towards the end there it got very hectic, because at that point it's like, which one are you going to argue for? Do you like Yami more? Are you going to argue for him more? Do you like him being the strongest Espada? Well, then here's what you would use. And I know that in the debate community, a lot of people really like to just anally focus on objectivity. They want to be as objective as possible. But this is one of those topics that can really go any which way. There's a lot of ways to argue it. Like even at the beginning, I was talking about how the definition for how the Espada was ranked, like that's even contestable in and of itself. So you can be the kind of person that's like, no, Aizen ranked them in terms of their spiritual powers. Spiritual powers mean you're stronger than X character below you. So therefore the rankings are correct. And so that's what I'm going to argue. And that's for, you can go ahead and do that. I did that for years. I wanted to explain why the Espada were ranked the way they were, but now my outlook has changed a little bit. And of course I like to argue different positions and things. And that's why how we've ended up here with like Zomari potentially being the second strongest Espada, or the 5th, you know, somewhere around there. Do keep in mind that this was not a video about who would actually beat who, because if we start taking their abilities and powers into consideration, then we have like Sael's Gabriel ability, we have Baragon's Respira, we have Zomari's Amor. Like Zomari might solo the entire Espada by himself, if actually like really think about it. If we were talking about who would beat who, Zomari's kind of an ape at that point. Literally just takes control of everybody's body and tells them to all kill themselves, which I've heard some people in the Noitora camp try to counter that by saying, well, Noitora can't, you know, kill himself, he can't pierce his own armor, right? And you can't have both. You can't have Noitora not getting killed by Zomari because he can't pierce his armor, but also being strong enough to counter Kenpachi, who can pierce his armor, right? Again, that gets into another thing where it's like, well, depends on how you argue. It's like, well, sometimes you just can't have both sides, right? But anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It lets me know that you guys like this kind of Bleach content, and I'll keep doing more of it. I know a lot of you guys have been very supportive of the tier list, and I enjoy making them. Although this wasn't really like a tier list video like the Ichigo forums one, right? But you know, pretty similar. If you feel like joining the Discord to come talk with me and other like-minded people, you know, other people that want to debate and get better as well are in the Discord, feel free to join. It's very beginner friendly. A lot of the people that are pretty good at debating in the Discord are willing to work with you. They're not going to like yell and spurg out at you unless you do that first, right? So if you come in there spurging out, someone is probably going to yell and spurg out at you. I'm just gonna throw that out there right now. I can't address that. But if you come in there and you're like, hey, I want to get better, I don't think I'm very good, there's a lot of people that'll work with you and help you get better. You know, I'll even try to help you from time to time and work on your argumentation. But it's also open if you want to come have a nice little round of fisticuffs with me. Maybe you're like, I can't accept that Zomari would ever be that powerful, and I'll be like, all right, let's throw down, buddy. You know, that's, you know, always an open invitation for you guys. But finally, if you want to go that extra mile and support the channel, click that join button. You'll get access to any debate that I have uploaded and will upload in the future. You get access to past live streams. You get access to certain chats in the Discord as well. Like, just a whole host of really good abilities that you're getting access to. But I think with all that being said, I'm finally good to get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, ladies, guys.